Oh my God. Oh my freaking God. Let me mute myself here. Were any of you watching that? Were any of you watching that? I had to take a little breath before I started this reaction stream. Okay, I'm done. I'm not panicking anymore, Chopper. Chopper's here. Chopper's here to save that day. Oh my God. All right, I just want you all to know that I am not invested in any side of this story in terms of whether there is a guilty or a not guilty verdict, okay? What I am invested in, oh my God. Yes, Raining on Your Charade. I love your screen name, by the way, Raining on Your Charade. That closing was, it angered me to no end. And not because I think that Jennifer Crumbley should be declared guilty, but because if she is guilty, or let's say if she is not guilty, I feel like her defense attorney just made sure she wouldn't be declared guilty by that closing statement, or wouldn't be declared, not guilty by that closing statement. Now, that's not putting a lot of faith in the jurors, because the jurors really are supposed to be the finders of fact based on the law. But I have never seen a more selfish, self-absorbed, grandstanding, petty, malicious against the prosecution and the state closing statement in my life, with the possible exception of Lana Oriani. Okay. Of course, I'm gonna have to put that in there, but Lana's not a real attorney, so she doesn't really count. But anyway, that was absolutely offensive. And at first I was going to show, as we do verdict watch, I was going to show Jennifer Crumbley's, the poor jury. Oh my God, it took so long. At first I was going to show Jennifer Crumbley's testimony, but this closing, it just requires some reaction, because it was so ignorant. It was so devoid of reason in terms of facts and arguing of what is really meaningful. And honestly, yes, tone deaf is a good way to put it, Sparkles. And if she was my lawyer, I'd be pissed. I would be so pissed, because, and I'll start things going in a minute here, so that it's not just me talking about it before we get going. But basically, obviously, Shannon Smith, this lawyer, went home and watched the social media reaction to her performances, right? And is extraordinarily self-conscious. Yeah. And talked about, made a part of her closing, her TikTok. The fact that somebody made a TikTok about her ineptness with, and her inability to handle herself when she gets frazzled in the courtroom, right? I mean, clearly she wasn't watching my video. So she had to weave in all these stories about her self-consciousness. She had to get defensive about her performance in the courtroom and explain all of that away rather than focusing on, yeah, yes, she weaved in all these details of her personal life. She kept talking about her daughters. At one point, she said, sometimes she thinks her daughter is psychotic. If I was her daughter, I would fucking disown her. I would ask for an emancipation. She sat there and talked about her daughters like they are psychotic. And, what she was trying to do was normalize everything that Jennifer Crumbley did leading up to that shooting. And, I just don't think it's a very good strategy. Yeah, she came off like an alcoholic. Hey, Marie, you're obviously entitled to do that, to think she did good. I just don't agree. She was certainly impassioned. She was very good at being impassioned. So I don't think it's a great strategy to get up and acknowledge that people think she's unlikable and people think she's inept, and then go on to compare herself. Right. But Emily Suzanne, do you go into a courtroom that's being broadcast to thousands, maybe millions of people and tell everybody about that? Tell them that? I mean, they just really don't compare, okay, in my mind. So anyway, you get up, you acknowledge that on social media and the reports believe you're unlikable and that you get frazzled and all this stuff. And then you go on to compare yourself to the shooter's mother and try to normalize her in that way. I don't think that's a great strategy. I'm unlikable, but I'm also like my client. I do the same things my clients do. Right? And yes, she also said, when you go back into your deliberation room, she talks about how she would like to be able to jump up during the rebuttal and be able to, make all kinds of counterpoints, but she can't, right? So she wants the jury to go back in the deliberation room and think, what would Shannon think? What would Shannon think about the rebuttal that the prosecution is about to make? I'm sorry. It's just not about her. And it was, I truly do think she did a disservice to her client. No, maybe her client just loves all of that about her. That's fine. Her client is entitled to that. But I truly feel she did a disservice. So with all that said, why don't we get into it? And yeah, what would the victims think? What would the victims think? There was even one point where I forget whether Shannon, the lawyer, was quoting the mother or if Shannon was just saying this, but she basically disregarded anybody who was just shot. Well, if you were just shot, yeah, that's no big deal. You can get on with your life. But if you die, well, then it's over. That's permanent. That's forever. No, if you get shot in a school shooting, that's also permanent damage. That is huge trauma. If you're anywhere even near a school shooting and see the aftermath of it, that is permanent damage. And so regardless of whether you think Jennifer Crumbley should be found guilty or not guilty, and I'm not married to either one, okay? This trial should show you something, okay? And that is that we as a culture, as a society, are incredibly ignorant about mental illness and what mental distress looks like. And we do neglect that side of our health. Okay. Our health does include mental health, but that gets ignored. So they talked about Jennifer being a helicopter mom when it comes to seeing a mole on his back that might have changed colors and takes him to the doctor. But when he is drawing guns and saying help, she doesn't take him to the doctor for that. When she's told to take him to counseling, she doesn't do that. When he is saying that he is hearing things, they just throw it off as, oh, he's just being goofy. When he's texting back and forth with his friend, we find out later in Discovery that he's talking to his friend and he's saying, I need help. And, I'm feeling these things. Shannon, the lawyer, just plays that off as, oh, he's just saying goofy things. That is why we have such huge problems with mental health in our country, in the United States. So, take away, and by the way, I don't want to have any political discussions whatsoever about guns or anything like that, okay? Take that entire conversation off the table. Just talking about mental health, okay? Just talking about mental health. If you believe that the only way to stop these school shootings from happening is to deal with mental health, then pay fucking attention to your kids' mental health. And understand that a child, even, a 15-year-old is a child, okay? Your brain is not fully developed until you're 25, okay? Even though you get to start drinking when you're 21 or maybe even younger in some states, your brain is not fully functioning as an adult until you're 25. And that's if you don't have any childhood trauma. And most of us do get childhood trauma. Okay. So, you have to learn how to listen to what they are not saying. You have to learn how to understand the signs. There's no way your child is going to come up to you and say, Mom, I'm feeling mentally unwell. Can you take me to a psychiatrist today? No. What they're going to do is ask for your attention in different ways. They're going to say, I hear voices. They're going to say, can you please text me back? They're going to try to get your attention in extremely annoying and aggravating ways. They're going to try to take you away from your job. They're going to do things that you don't want to have to deal with. Okay? You have to be able to watch for those things, just like you would watch for, is my kid is sniffling? Does he have a common cold, or could it be something more? You have to watch for that with mental health as well. So if this trial shows you anything, please look at what led up to this kid doing what he was doing. All right. He drew guns. I personally do believe that reasonable care was not taken, that they could have reasoned if they understood what the signs are of mental distress, if they had paid attention to those signs, if they had been more diligent, then it possibly could have been prevented. So, and I'm not a lawyer, so I can't argue the legalities of it, but I feel like the prosecution did a good job of helping the jury to understand that you do not have to find Jennifer Crumbley guilty of murder. Ethan Crumbley has already been found guilty of murder. You have to find that she didn't meet her duty of care. She was the parent. He was the child. Okay. And so with all of that said, let's get into this absolutely chaotic, combative, Oh, wow. Thank you so much. Don't worry about it, sweetheart, who just gifted 10 memberships. Woo! I really appreciate that. And welcome to all the people who will get memberships as a result of that. Fungus Among Us. That's a funny name too, Fungus Among Us. What you're saying applies to everyone with mental health issues. They often cannot recognize their own issues. Yes, it's up to those around them to help figure it out, and it's incredibly difficult. It took me so long to figure out what's actually, thank you so much, don't worry about it, sweetheart. It took me so long to figure out what's actually wrong with me. Even the mental health field is behind and floundering. So it takes a while to figure out what's actually wrong. They misdiagnose people all the time. All the time. Okay. So I got misdiagnosed. I had the wrong medications. I had the wrong treatments. I finally have the right diagnosis. I finally have the right treatment. Okay. And thank God, because I remember walking around going, I don't know what the fuck is going on. I just don't. And it was such a struggle. And I can only imagine what it's like being a kid with that kind of a struggle, you know, his age, and with the kind of thoughts that he was having. Right? Oh God, it's just heartbreaking. So anyway, the biggest takeaway from all of this is pay attention. If you have kids, no matter what age they are, even if they're adults by now, they aren't always going to know. They're not going to be able to walk up to you and say, I have bipolar, mom. Can you take me to the shrink? They don't know. All they're going to be able to do is say, I feel terrible, or that it'll come out in their behavior. Yeah, same with ADHD. I mean, that was a big struggle with me, like with me and my ex, trying to get him to understand that it's not a horrible thing to take your kid to get evaluated to see whether they have ADHD. It's not a permanent stain on his school record if he might have ADHD. So it's just a same with addiction as well. Yes, same with addiction. Nobody's going to walk up to you and go, I'm addicted to something, but you have to watch in the behavior. You have to understand the signs, right? And, think about this. People are pretty good at recognizing the signs of whether somebody's drunk, right? You probably wouldn't give your kid the keys to a car or leave the keys to your car laying around if you know that your kid has a drinking problem, right? Or they even got pulled over for a DUI. How is that different from your kid exhibiting issues of mental distress and leaving a gun around? How is that different? A gun is even more deadly. It's deliberately deadly. A car is not. A car is just a thing to get around in. Right? So, anyway, I just want to... All right, you've heard me rant for a bit. You'll probably hear me rant more because this woman, oh my God. And it makes a lot of sense that she was the defense attorney for Larry Nassar. Of course, he lost too. Woo-wee. All right, here we go. Oh, wait. I lost my place. Oh, no, that's me. Okay.
Yes, thank you. As the prosecutor finished, she said,
is that too loud, y'all? Either on my microphone or this or their sound?
said, this is shocking, unthinkable. I believe there were other words used throughout trial. Unbelievable.
Okay, thank you,
Obviously,
Sparkles.
unbelievable, unthinkable, unfathomable. And the reason that's the case is because it was unforeseeable. No one expected this. No one could have expected this, including Mrs. Crumbley. Now, the first thing I want to do very quickly is talk to you about the burden of proof. In the state of Michigan, there are different burden of proofs depending on what kind of a case it is.
Okay, can I just point out that was just a misspeaking, but she's a lawyer. She knows it's burdens of proof, not burden of proofs. Okay. Bye, Sparkles.
When people sue for money and say, I've been injured or I was failed by the school even, there will be civil lawsuits and the burden of proof is a preponderance of evidence. That means it's about a 50-50 standard. And if you have 50% of the evidence.
She even states this wrong. Okay. She's saying that a preponderance of the evidence means that if you have 50%, you're good. No, it's just a feather more than 50%. I'm not a lawyer and I know that.
That's the burden of proof for civil. When the state thinks it's important to take away a person's children, the burden goes up and the burden has to prove more evidence. And that specifically is clear and convincing evidence that it's correct for the state to be taking away a person's children. Now, the highest burden in this country is in a criminal case, and that is beyond a reasonable doubt. And the reason I'm telling you about the differences in the burdens is because in a criminal case, if you have just one reasonable doubt about the case, you must vote not guilty. And so this is my poster just showing beyond a reasonable doubt.
Oh, I missed the poster before.
But there's many, many other options. If
Very
you
Lana-like.
likely, probable, possible, not likely, those are all not guilties. You have to be sure beyond a reasonable doubt. And later, as I go through my closing, I am going to tell you the reasonable doubts that the defense believes exist in this case for you to look at. The other thing I have to ask you to keep in mind is that in the jury instructions, and I think you've been told this throughout trial, the defense does not have to prove or do anything. Like Judge Matthews said, we could sit at the table and play chess the whole time, call no witnesses, cross-examine no witnesses, provide no evidence, because we have no burden to prove a thing. However, in this case, you obviously saw the defense present Mrs. Crumbley, who took the stand, so that she could give you some context beyond parts of the evidence that were confusing when the prosecutor was introducing in bits and pieces. And the problem in this case is that we can all agree everything can be seen different in two ways. First of all, when you look back in hindsight with 20/20 vision, when you look back in hindsight, it is easy to say, this could have been different, that could have been different, this would have changed. And the other circumstance, the second one that makes a huge difference, is when you get full context around the evidence that is being used. And in this case, the prosecutor has cherry-picked little bits of evidence out of mountains of evidence to put in front of you with no context to explain what they're doing. And when you get cherry-picked bits of evidence, it's easy to reach wrong conclusions. Now, during jury selection, it felt like the prosecutor was asking you questions and giving more of a campaign speech than a jury selection proceeding. And I would suggest to you that at the end of the day, the only judge, although Ms. McDonald mentioned she's been a judge and was a judge several times during her jury selection, the only judge in this courtroom that matters is Judge Matthews. And the only other people whose judgment matters are the.
So this is where she starts to throw shade at the prosecution. She constantly throwing shade at the prosecution. Now, I understand, what she shows over and over and over again is that she really, really does not like the prosecution. That's fine. You don't have to like the opposing counsel, but to constantly be throwing jabs at the opposing counsel during your closing or any part of the trial is so unprofessional and actually shows that your case is weak, in my opinion.
12 of you who will collectively decide this case. The rest of us don't matter. My opinion doesn't matter. Ms. McDonald's doesn't matter. The opinions of everyone in this audience doesn't matter. The media and all of the people who think they know everything behind keyboards at home commenting about what they think the evidence in this case has shown.
Now, it was funny when she said this, because the chat was like, hey, wait a minute. I was watching in Law and Crime, and they were like, I feel attacked. I feel attacked. I mean, so she's already showing that, she's been going home and looking at that's us, brah. I mean, she's been going home and watching what has been said about her. It's she's extremely self-conscious, so self-absorbed,
So during this case, it's obvious real life
for sure
is messy and complicated. And during this trial, I will openly admit that I'm a lawyer who messes up. I get thrown off when I'm surprised by something. I feel like I get overwhelmed when information is coming at me quickly. I say I'm sorry a lot. Evidently, there's a TikTok channel of me saying I'm sorry through this whole trial. And all I'm saying is that I'm human. I am a human being, and so is Mrs. Crumbley. And that's what this case is about. She's not a perfect person or a perfect parent.
So basically, she just admits that she's kind of being evaluated as not super likable and kind of, a spaz, honestly. And she's just like Mrs. Crumbley. Now, that doesn't make Mrs. Crumbley guilty, but it's not a very good way to paint your client. Hey, evil queen.
I'm certainly not a perfect person or a perfect parent. And I'm certainly, beyond a reasonable doubt, bad with
All right, you guys, I can't help it. I'm not a perfect person. Sorry.
technology, which is why you're not going to see me touch that laptop. So during this trial, I have stood before you and shown you all my flaws, and I embrace them, and they are a part of what makes me human. And so has Jennifer Crumbley. She got on the stand and talked about every nook and cranny of her life, things no one else in the world knew, in her family, among her friends.
So now she's pointing out what I believe was a mistake on hers and Jennifer Crumbley's part, which was putting Jennifer Crumbley on the stand, because she looked terrible. She looked negligent. She looked like she had terrible judgment. She looked self-absorbed herself. She looked, that did not do her favors. And now she's pointing out that she got up and embraced all her flaws. And the defense goes on to just talk about all of Jennifer's flaws and excuse all her flaws and compare Jennifer's flaws to her own.
And she wanted you to see the whole truth, the entire truth, and nothing but the truth on everything, where she had to show you that she has made immoral decisions to have an affair, that she has made decisions you might not make to have another person involved in the affair. Now, we didn't get too far into the details, but it was enough for you to know that Mrs. Crumbley got up there.
She wasn't forthright about bringing another person into the affair. That came up on the prosecution's cross-examination. And she was, what's the word I'm looking? Evasive in that line of questioning.
And literally stripped off her armor, let the prosecution cross-examine her and show you what happened in her messy life. And I say that with all kindness because I'm a mess too.
Yeah,
I saw a meme about a week ago that said, I'm trying to be a mom, trying to get exercised, stay hydrated, get enough sleep, text everyone back, and not lose my shit. And I've got to be honest, as a mom, a working mom, on most days, I'm lucky if I'm fit for human contact. I'm lucky.
So I can deeply empathize with everything she just said there, okay? Because I was that working mom and I was in the tech industry, which is notoriously demanding. Like it basically sucks you in and sucks you dry and makes you on call for 24 hours, especially in PR. But to make that part of a defense and to compare it to a school shooter's mom just it seems like a just incredible miscalculation. She's a lawyer. Okay. Of course she's going to be incredibly busy. Lawyers are very, very busy. They work really hard, especially defense attorneys. Okay. Jennifer Crumbley sat there on the stand and said that her work hours were like 7 to 4. Okay. Those are not super long working hours. Yeah, there you go. Single mom in the U.S. Air Force. I mean, so yeah, you're going to go days where you feel like you're just wiping yourself down with baby wipes or something. I mean, and your house is messy and you don't want people coming over surprising you because you're going to look like you don't keep your house or whatever. I understand all of that. It's a lot different from what we're seeing here. If I could be, a frazzled working mother, but if my kid drew a picture of a gun with blood and said, help me, I would be fucking paying attention to that. Okay.
Lucky if I've taken a true shower and didn't just grab a handful of wipes and scrub off the best I can on my way running out the door, putting on my makeup as I drive to court in my car. Because my life is not perfect and no one's is. And during this trial, you may have concluded that you don't like me, that you hate me. That's fine. I am just asking that your opinions about me as a person, and if you're one of the people who plans to make a TikTok about me, that you won't hold those opinions against Jennifer Crumbley and will judge Jennifer Crumbley's case based on the evidence about her and her family. And if you hate her or don't like her or agree with things she's done, that's okay too. You don't have to like her. You are not expected to go hang out with her when this is all over. After trial, you don't have to decide if you want to go to her house. You don't have to have Thanksgiving with her. But when you're looking at the evidence in this case, it's important to set aside your opinions of her or take your opinions of me and supplant them on Mrs. Crumbley. Now, when I took on this case pretty early on, I realized I am Jennifer Crumbley and I could be here accused and sitting in her spot very easily. Now, in my house,
and here she starts with an incredibly dangerous normalization of what Jennifer Crumbley did, which was to ignore many telltale signs that her son was in emotional distress, and then still went out and bought him a gun as a gift and left it unsecured, and then lied about leaving it unsecured. Okay.
we don't have guns. I don't have guns, but I do have children. And actually, I have an oopsie baby, my fourth one. I did not want 4 in 4 years, but that's what I was blessed with. I say I'm abundantly blessed. And I have kids that seem to have no issues. And at the end of the day, they're good kids. They go to school. We have no discipline problems. We have arguments here and there.
Oh man, I'd be so pissed if I were her kids right now.
I have a son that wants to hang out with me very rarely, but I have no belief that any of my 4 children would ever harm anyone else. And while I don't have a gun, I have a large butcher block on my counter with big knives that I use when I cook, and I enjoy cooking. And
knives are never used in school attacks. Okay? I mean, this is just ridiculous.
And at the end of the day, my kids could just as easily grab a knife without me knowing it and without me having it on my radar and walk out the door of my house and go play with their kids, the other kids on my block. Granted, they live farther down my block because I'm in the middle of nowhere. And my son could kill somebody with my butcher block knife that I would have never expected to happen. And if you saw the text messages that my husband and I exchanged on a daily basis throughout this past year and even years before, it would be so easy for me to be in her seat. With my kids, I don't monitor assignments.
The entire
I don't
thing's
look
terrible.
at their phones. I have no reason to. My son plays a lot of video games. My son's online talking to a bunch of people as he's playing a lot of video games. Even though he has a cell phone, I don't go through it and look at his messages every day. And as he gets older, I do know he's interested in girls. If he starts receiving nude pictures of a girl on the cell phone I own but let him use and gave him for his birthday when he turned 11, should I be held accountable for receiving child pornography if a girl sexts him over some inappropriate pictures?
What a horrible, horrible comparison. Horrible. Apples, oranges, grapes, and watermelons.
Pictures. If my son decides he's going to send some pictures back and takes a nude picture of his bits and pieces, that's a 20-year felony. Am I then responsible because he sent a picture of his penis over to some girl? So not only taking the picture, a 20-year felony, but then we've got a 7-year felony for sending it over. Can every parent really be responsible for everything their children do? Especially when it's not foreseeable. And this clearly was not foreseeable to Mrs. Crumbley.
Yes, dear, you are legally responsible for what your child does.
Because there's no one in the world, including Mrs. Crumbley, who would have let a school shooting happen and let what happened on November 30th take place. Not only ruining the lives of so many families and victims and taking the lives of 4 young people, but also ruining her own son's life and ripping his life right from her as well. She would be the first person on the planet who would have never let that happen in a million years.
But it did. It did.
So this case is a very dangerous one for parents out there. It just is. And it is one of the first of its kind. Luckily, however, this is a case where the prosecution cannot meet its burden of proof. And thankfully, it's a case where truly Mrs. Crumbley does have a defense. And this isn't just one of those stretched cases where a parent is liable for what their child has done. Now, the judge is going to tell you that you have to, if you find reasonable doubt in this case, you must find the defendant not guilty. And the law says you must have a reasonable doubt, not 3 reasonable doubts, not 5 reasonable doubts, not 10. If you have a single reasonable doubt, you must vote not guilty for Mrs. Crumbley. And when it comes to reasonable doubt, each of you can have a separate reason to have doubt in this case. You don't have to agree on what the doubt is. And for that,
that's probably the strongest thing she has said in defense of her client. Seriously.
That reason, what I am going to do is show you all of the doubts that the defense believes exist in this matter. Some of them may speak to one juror, some of them may speak to another, but at the end of the day, if you have just one, your vote in this case must be not guilty. So the first place the defense finds reasonable doubt is in the fact that the prosecution.
So here's where Shannon brings out a stack of cards, okay? And what she does, and you know what? I'm probably going to fast forward through a lot of this because it's so mundane, and it's so, what she basically does is go through practically every little, let's see, character flaw. Every little character flaw that the prosecution brings up against Jennifer, and then tries to argue against the character flaw, not really on a legal basis, but basically defending her character flaws. Well, she had a messy house. That's not reasonable doubt. She had an affair. That's not reason. That's, I mean, you can find reasonable doubt because that doesn't mean she's a school shooter. Bogart, I'm so mad right now. FYI, the state of California, parents are fined and jailed in some cases for the truancy of their child. This attorney is whacked. Yeah. You know, you're right. I didn't even think of that, but you're absolutely right. Jesus. So anyway, she starts going through these stacks of cards, and you're going, oh my God, how many more cards does she have? How many more cards? Let's speed it up. Let's speed it up. Watch her flip through these cards, okay? Hold on.
The prosecution is so desperate to prosecute this case that they admitted a mountain of evidence that, quite frankly, was unnecessary. Now, they say to you, they needed to show you, they needed to prove the man. But this prosecution, putting that evidence on, was designed to inflame you and make you emotional, strike your sympathy.
So she just starts throwing all this shade at the prosecution and accuses them of, she goes on to accuse them of a conspiracy, basically.
And get you to hate Mrs. Crumbley, which, by the way, has been very effective for most of the media, most of the public, and for anyone who has seen information put out by this prosecutor in this case. A second reasonable doubt comes from the fact that we know, and the evidence in this case showed, context is key. And that was clear when Detective Wygorowski bring together, and subsequently when given his message is now
pieces of useless evidence, like Jennifer Crumbley saying that her son was an oopsie baby. I call my son that. So what? Does that mean I hate my son?
Oh, that just drove me nuts. It's you can't compare one parent to another parent calling a kid an oopsie baby. If Jennifer Crumbley went around calling Ethan an oopsie baby and treated him like he's an oopsie baby, then he probably felt like an accident of a human being. Okay? That doesn't mean that every parent who goes around talking about oopsie babies thinks, treats their child like they actually are an oopsie baby and they were not wanted. Ethan, it seems to me, probably felt like he was not wanted. My understanding is between James and Jennifer Crumbley, he was their only child, right? He had half brothers with James, but he was their only child. So they weren't planning to have children. But she got pregnant and they had him. And now they're just kind of dealing with him. And that's how he feels.
Does that mean I would be okay if he went and killed a bunch of people and or if he committed suicide? No. A coworker who's not a friend to Jennifer Crumbley and has been interviewed by law enforcement to tell you her advice on she should go have a Mother's Sunday with her teenager. So irrelevant. We spend time together, but that's not their first priority. And part of what made me realize I could be in Mrs. Crumbley's shoes is I sent text to my husband saying our daughter is a psycho today.
I mean, for her to keep comparing her life to Jennifer's life when they are such different people, to normalize all of this, to just try to lump all parents together like this. No, oopsie baby, she meant we didn't mean to get pregnant. Evil Queen, is that the same type of deflection because she couldn't defend her client? The prosecutor bears the responsibility of proving case beyond a reasonable doubt. Yeah.
On the way to school last week, she's crying. She doesn't have people to sit with at lunch. I texted him. She's in nutcase. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to handle this.
Can you, if I was this woman's daughter, I wouldn't talk to her for the rest of the day, maybe the week. You just told an entire courtroom that was watching that you texted my dad and told him that I'm psycho, and you just told everybody I'm psycho. And you know, if her daughter, depending on how I'm assuming her daughter's a minor, right? How's she supposed to process that in the middle of a trial about a fucking school shooter? Oh, the daughter isn't going to see that as, oh, honey, that was just me trying to put on a defense. The daughter's going to take that as, I'm a psycho. My mom thinks I'm a psycho. Oh, Jesus Christ.
I don't have time for this. My other daughter is complaining about her lights flickering in her room. I texted my husband, this sounds like a case. The start of a case. My husband works for my...
Now she's comparing the lights and the flickering. And you know what? If your daughter is seeing lights flickering in the room and you're laughing that off and she sees that on a regular basis and you're ignoring that, yeah, you might end up in Jennifer Crumbley's seat. Do you understand, lady? You are also ignoring the signs of mental distress in your child. And it's your job. It's your job to raise your child, to protect your child, and to watch out for these types of signs of their mental health and their physical health.
My office, he's actually my office manager, so he knows about the case. He went in her room and figured out in 5 minutes it's because when she flips her blow dryer on, one of our plugs makes the lights flicker. So this ghost that you would read about in my text messages, which by the way I did not respond to, despite the fact that it's on our 6-person group chat, would be taken out of context and make me look like I don't really care that my daughter is crazy. I also got text one day. We have no food in our house. I am absolutely starving. You are the worst mother.
She just said, it makes it look like that I don't really care that my daughter is crazy. Those things are being said by this woman about her child in a courtroom about a school shooter.
Mother ever. And you know what I did? I ignored it. She was mad we didn't have the right kind of chicken ramen when we have 85, I like the number 85, when we have 4 other flavors of ramen, and there's about 100 other things she can eat.
And now she's bringing out her grievances against her daughter. Now she's airing her grievances out against her daughter in this courtroom where it doesn't belong.
And I knew she's not going to starve to death, but taken out of context, it makes me look like a neglectful mother.
You are.
If you know all the circumstances,
Sorry, you are.
know the relationship I have with my daughter, I knew it was an overdramatic, stupid point.
Okay, I don't know if she is, but I'm.
So when you see
reacting.
messages from Mrs. Crumbley's son saying, will you at least call back? Those are so out of context. And when I'm driving home from court every day, I'm getting messages, will you at least call back? And I don't, because I know what they want is for me to run through the McDonald's drive-thru and bring everyone a Coke. I do stop and get myself a Coke, but I am not getting around with drinks every day for everyone. And I've realized it's easier to not answer the phone.
Oh my God, you selfish bitch. Jesus Christ.
So you can find reasonable doubt from the context that the defense did actually provide. And when Mrs. Crumbley got on the stand and explained to you her understanding of ghosts and dishes flying and laundry flying, that is evidence. And that is something that can create reasonable doubt to hear what was really going on. Even if you believe the prosecution's dates about what was going on, it's not strong evidence. It's very misleading. And I'm going to go through what it does show. There are 3 sets of dates involving Mrs. Crumbley, all from March of 2021. The first time is March 8th and 9th. They introduced exhibits, including text messages on the 8th, where Mrs. Crumbley starts off asking, is he home yet? Is he home yet? I don't want him to do anything stupid. I'm sure you all remember those. Then they introduced evidence on March 9th that she went to the barn that day with her husband.
She had them out already.
Then they introduced evidence, and I will give them credit. They put together quite a case, although it's really not important, that there was a picture of the horse taken at the barn that day, that the data supports there was a picture of the horse taken at the barn that day.
So now she painstakingly goes through all of the evidence that the prosecution has brought out, reminding the jury of the evidence against Jennifer Crumbley, and then does not give a good defense against it. In my opinion.
And that there was GPS tracking information supporting that you create these beautiful TikToks. And I'm going to tell you what they show. Now, these ended up all being admitted as exhibits, but I'm going to go in order of what they show. There was a text thread in Exhibit 85, which if you want to look at it, you can, where Jennifer Crumbley said, I'm going to get drunk and ride my horse. This was on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. A lot of people have a cocktail on St. Patrick's Day. That does.
This is where she goes into the things that she drinks and how much she drinks. I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with Jennifer Crumbley talking about riding and getting drunk on St. Patrick's Day. What I have a problem with is her kid saying, hey, I'm seeing things. Can you come home? And her fucking ignoring him. That's what I have a problem with.
Does not make her a mother that would be negligent or grossly negligent to her child. There's text messages from the day before where Mrs. Crumbley's son is saying some things about, now the house is haunted. Some weird shit just happened. Now I'm scared. I got some videos, a picture of a demon. It's throwing bowls. I'm not joking. It fucked up the kitchen. I'm going outside for a while. Can you at least text back? On that day, Mrs. Crumbley didn't text back, but.
Right. She didn't text back. So all those things that were just read off by the defense, the things that Ethan was saying to her, to his mother, those could be signs of mental distress. Jennifer's immediate response was, oh, he's just playing. We like to play with each other. One time I flipped off the electricity just to spoof them, just to scare them. Isn't that funny? Isn't that super funny? One time, James pretended he was being electrocuted. Isn't that hilarious? Scared the shit out of all of us. Isn't that hilarious? Yeah. You know, families do funny things like that to each other, right? But you don't use that as an excuse to then ignore continuing signs that your kid thinks that things are actually happening. And then as the signs continue to mount up, continue to ignore it and just ignore it and ignore it and ignore it.
Their own exhibit, okay, which is Exhibit 83. So the numbers do bounce around. So we go from 85 to 86 to 83, show that within an hour of the shooter making these ghost comments. She did call him. Specifically, she called him back at 7:24, and they had a 19-second phone call. If it was 19 seconds, it most likely was, I'm on my way home, we'll talk when I get home. So then the state, in order to make it seem like they've really, really got some proof here, they admitted exhibits 87, which show on the 17th on St. Patrick's Day, James was on a horse. They showed people out at the bar, which is where their son says the house is haunted. This is on the 17th. This is the day where he says he texts back. This is the day where I already showed you the exhibit. She called him. She didn't text back, but she called him. What happened if they believed their child had mental illnesses? And these are people that had 2 other guns in the house for months where nothing ever happened with those guns. They had no reason to believe that somehow this third gun was the thing that was going to make the difference.
Unless it's the exact type of gun that school shooters use. Sorry.
That the prosecution admitted as exhibit 101 were texts between the shooter and his friend that we have not named. The extent of these text messages saying goofy things like, I told my dad to take me to the doctor. He gave me pills to suck it up. It's at the point I'm asking to go to the doctor. I'm having insomnia.
So all these texts that she's reading off right now, she categorizes as goofy. Oh, he's just saying goofy things. I told my dad that I'm feeling a certain kind of way, and he just said to suck it up. That's just goofy. That's negligence, ladies and gentlemen. Okay?
Paranoia. I'm calling 911. I thought about calling 911, but my parents would be pissed. I don't disagree with the prosecution that these are alarming.
I mean, doesn't that tell you something that the parents would be pissed? Would be pissed if he called 911 for himself?
Messages, but clearly the shooter's friend isn't that alarmed because he's not texting back. The shooter's friend.
Oh, okay. So let's go off of the shooter's friend's opinion, who's a minor who apparently suffers from severe OCD to the extent that he was institutionalized for it. Let's put the opinion off on him. Well, because he wasn't alarmed, then we're not alarmed either. Okay.
Knows there must be more going on because he doesn't tell Mrs. Crumbley, who is like, and he's like a second child to her. And we have no other context about these messages. And if anything, the evidence does not show that Mrs. Crumbley ever saw these messages. Now, when she sees them now, she thinks that's crazy. She'd like to know more context. But you also have to know, and another reasonable doubt you may find in this case, is created when you compare these text messages that were sent that have alarming things between Ethan and his friend to all of the messages between them, which are over 20,000. And what I would believe is that if the state had stronger evidence, they would have paraded it up and we would have been seeing a lot more of these. But instead, they were admitted, and you haven't heard the friend testify. You haven't.
So what she's basically saying here is, if there was more evidence of the parents being concerned about Ethan's mental health, the prosecution would have presented it. She just argued against herself, because the entire issue is that the parents were not concerned about his mental health. So you don't see evidence of them being concerned about his mental health. You see evidence of him saying, help, 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 and them not responding to that. And she's making that argument for the prosecution, like a dumbass.
I haven't heard any context about these. And all you can see, and really all the evidence shows, is that there's no reason to believe Mrs. Crumbley ever saw that. I don't want to have another leaning tower of Pisa situation. I've taken your advice. Now, the other evidence the state has shown are little bits and pieces from the shooter's journal that are quite alarming and disturbing. But again, Mrs. Crumbley says the information in there about my parents won't listen to me for help is not true. And there is no evidence to show she ever saw that 22-page handwritten document. She never saw the little bits of evidence that the prosecution admitted.
But she did stipulate on the stand to him, if I recall correctly, saying he wanted help or something like that, and them not getting the help.
to evaluate this case, you have to look at it from the perspective of what she knew. So the journal information and the small amount of text compared to all the text with his friend are things she didn't know about. There's also 2 times where the state says that they have proof that Mrs. Crumbley's son was showing signs of depression or being sad or lonely. All right, those come from April 29th, 2001. This is when Jennifer Crumbley emails the friend, his mother, and all she says is that her son has been acting kind of depressed. She doesn't know what's going on. She's trying to find out what's going on, but he won't really tell her much. She's trying to find out if there's an issue between the 2 boys.
So here, Jennifer Crumbley is texting the mother of Ethan's friend. Okay. And she's not trying to say, gosh, I'm concerned about my son. Trying to understand why he's depressed and whether I should get him help. She's trying to say, is there a problem between our kids? Because he seems depressed, and I think it's because there's a problem between our kids. All right. That's what's happening in these text messages. And it shows you that she has an extremely superficial understanding of what of mental distress and depression and things like. The only words she has to describe these symptoms is sad and depressed. There are a lot of other words to describe the way a kid can behave if they're going through some sort of mental distress.
She should be aware of. She's trying to get down to the bottom of it. If anything, she's doing what a good mom does to try to figure it out. But the worst of what she says is that he's stressed by school. I don't want to get this wrong. He's been acting kind of depressed. And she's happy to hear it's not an issue between them. Then they go on to make plans for their son. This was admitted as Exhibit 104. If you put my text up there, it showed every time I told my mom that one of my kids was acting depressed or weird. I guess my favorite word is moody these days. It would look like my kids were complete lunatics. I'm actually shocked Jennifer Crumbley doesn't have more texts about her son acting like a typical teenager. And Jennifer Crumbley testified, although she said that she
negligent about it,
to run to a doctor about, or anything she needed to do anything more with, in this moment passed. Because if it didn't, the prosecution would have brought in all the texts that went beyond this, and there'd be more evidence. And ultimately, it's a lack of evidence on the state's part.
Fast forward a bit.
And I would submit to you that after, there was no reason law enforcement needed to interview him for 2 hours, 1 hour, and then 3 hours. She thought leaving him in school with his friends was the better decision based on Hopkins saying peer support is a good thing.
Okay,
she thought making him an appointment was sufficient.
So here's where now it's all the school's fault that the Jennifer Crumbley was just relying on the school's expertise and basically expecting the school to make parenting decisions without all the information, not knowing that he has purchased a gun, not knowing that the day before he went to school and shot everybody, shot those kids, that they had a big fight. And in order to put him to sleep, to help him sleep, because he was somehow out of control, she gave him a whole tablet of melatonin. Okay? I would die before I gave anything to my kids to sleep, at that age. I remember my kid came to me when he was well into college, and he was like, yeah, I took some melatonin. I'm like, you took some melatonin? Oh my God. And there's a whole text conversation between Jennifer Crumbley and James Crumbley about, James was like, oh my God, you should have seen him when he woke up today. He was like, out of it. I felt like you might have gave him some Xanax or something. She's like, well, maybe I should have just given him a half of melatonin because he's never had any. So you're kidding me. He went to school fucking whacked out of his mind. Ugh.
An appointment within 48 hours was sufficient. That doesn't even mean the appointment was going to be within 48 hours. Reasonable doubt can be seen in the video when Mrs. Crumbley first sees her son at the substation. Her reaction to seeing him in this complete state of disbelief as to what's going on is to look at him
and note that all these things that she's bringing up are not legal conclusions for how to bring in reasonable doubt. These are character facts. These are character facts, circumstantial facts. These are possible character flaws that the prosecution brought up that the defense is getting extremely defensive about. I keep going back to that video of the kid fishing out at work. Was that another sleep aid? I'm not sure what you mean by fishing out at work. Is that, I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know what you mean by that, Dynamite.
And say, why? Why? She doesn't look at him and say, I knew you were going to do this. She doesn't look at him and say, see, I knew we shouldn't have bought that gun. She says, why? Why? And when he says, take care of Dexter, she cannot believe that's her son and goes back into the other room with her husband and says, what the fuck? He didn't even care. And while the prosecution asked questions about, well, she's not sobbing and we hear sobbing, and that's clearly James. James is sobbing. When you look at the video, if you decide you need to see it, Mrs. Crumbley is dabbing her eyes and wiping her eyes. And fine, she's not the crier some other people are. Reasonable doubts can come from the statements in the heat of the moment at the substation when Jennifer Crumbley is in a state of shock trying to answer their questions. She says, he's never done anything bad. This is after she already has somebody saying, you know, we should have a lawyer there. She's still just talking about what the truth is. He's never done anything bad. One of the parents says he's a perfect kid. Jennifer Crumbley tells them the most of an issue he ever has is anxiety over tests. Jennifer Crumbley tells them everything was fine this morning. In the statements Jennifer Crumbley made when she was in the car and doesn't even know yet if there's been fatalities, she says he's never done anything. She acknowledges he ruined lives today. She says, it's the first time I've ever seen him do anything. She says, he's a good kid. He's never angry. He's mellow. He's not what he looks like. He's not a monster. And she's not a monster.
See, and this is the part that just drives me crazy. So it's as if people expect that to be able to determine whether your kid is under mental distress or whether your kid is possible of either harming themselves or others, they have to all of a sudden, you know, they have to be a horrible kid all of their growing up lives, or they have to all of a sudden like break out into seizures and be like, I'm going to go kill people. I'm going to go kill. No, they're not going to just walk up to you and go, Mom, I'm about to shoot up a school. Can you help me? No, you have to watch for what they're not saying. They don't even know what they're talking about.
Either. She explains to them in detail when they ask, he's never had mental issues. In those moments, she can't even think straight about life around her. She's worrying about a horse and her job and all kinds of random stuff. And ladies and gentlemen, when... Right.
So she can't think straight. How does she think her 15-year-old kid can't think straight? And he's just killed a bunch of people. He obviously was thinking in the most not straight of ways. Hey, Kathy Four.
And emergencies happen. Life doesn't just stop. So the fact that she's able to function and think, I still need a job, I need some money, I need a phone that works, that doesn't mean she found 1 o'clock in the morning when they're ultimately found and woken up to guns in their face. She testified she took 4 Xanax, and so did her husband. We also saw evidence there was a...
Man, oh man. I've never taken Xanax, you guys, never. But I hear they're pretty strong. 4 Xanax? She took 4 Xanax. This was the night they had gone into hiding and the police were looking for them. Right? And she and her husband both took 4 Xanax and drank. I mean, it's almost like I feel like I might have died if I took that much. But I've never taken Xanax, so I don't know.
Liquor bottle in the garbage, and presumably she had a drink. After 4 days of no sleep and not really eating, one can only imagine how hard 4 Xanax and a cocktail might hit you. He's out in the Oxford, Lake Orion, Rochester area door dashing. She's the one with a professional career supporting the family and paying all their bills and trying to keep her job, which they may need to add the family on for insurance in this open enrollment period. She shouldn't be diminished as a mother because she was going to let father go to the school and handle whatever issue there was. Now, ultimately, they went together. But he's a DoorDash driver. She's trying to pay the bills. She's the breadwinner. At that time, he's in between jobs. She shouldn't be dinged for that. It's misleading for the prosecution to suggest there's been evidence in this case. She keeps gunning.
No one's dinging her for being the breadwinner or having the professional job. Just for not thinking twice about all the ways that her kid was screaming out for help. She had a duty of care.
For every parent that's ever had a hobby and has not spent 24/7 with their child, that should not be held against parents. For any parent that's ever had an affair or spent time communicating on an affair, that says nothing about how much you care about your child or your expectation of whether or not they would commit a school shooting. Most
Got
people
it,
who have affairs
Anya.
would still not expect their child would do this. I do wish more than anything, this case could bring justice to the victims.
Yeah, so Kathy, I have been prescribed Ativan. It's been a very long time. I remember taking half an Ativan and being like, okay, I don't ever want to take that again because I felt like shit in the morning.
Of the shooting, the victims of the terrorism that took place that day, and the victims of their families. I wish more than anything, it really could be a result that would be a Band-Aid to make everyone feel better, but it can't be. First of all, it brings back nothing for the people who have lost. It certainly doesn't bring back any lives. And if anything, this is not justice. This is not how justice works. This case does nothing for the people who have already lost everything. Many of the people sitting in this courtroom. And it does nothing to bring back the tragedy that unfolded on November 30th. At this point in time, the prosecution cannot prove.
I'm going to skip forward now to the prosecution's rebuttal because it's really good. I think it's pretty powerful, and it shows kind of the weaknesses in the local Chanel all over. It shows the weaknesses in this defense's arguments. So let's forward to that. Hold on. Here we go.
Not any doubt. You have a reasonable doubt. The defense gets to decide how they present their case. They get to decide that. She gets to stand up and say what she said. But your job is to listen to the facts of the case. Your job is to listen to what the judge tells you the law is. Your job is to tell you to let's look at the evidence, the people sitting here, not what somebody else wants to have said that they said, but what they actually said. Your job is to consider not what lawyers say about their own life and their own circumstances and their opinion. Your job is to consider the facts and the evidence of this case. I have to address a couple things, and I'm going to be quick. There was absolutely no evidence at all presented to you that anybody at that meeting told Jennifer Crumbley it was no big deal. There was no evidence of that. There was no evidence at all that Jennifer Crumbley was very surprised by how long the meeting lasted. Jennifer Crumbley didn't say that. That's not into evidence. I don't have to prove, the people do not have to prove that Jennifer Crumbley knew that there was going to be a homicide or a school shooting. As Lieutenant Willis pointed out correctly, if she knew exactly what was going to happen, she'd be charged with murder, ladies and gentlemen. She is not. She is charged with involuntary manslaughter. And the elements, you'll get them. I read them to you. The standard and what I have to prove is not that she knew that her son would go shoot up the school and kill 4 kids. I have to prove that she had a legal duty. She negligently performed that legal duty. She negligently did not take steps to take care and protect the other children in that school when there was a reasonable foreseeability that ordinary care was required. The smallest of things. The smallest of things. I apologize to the law enforcement in this room and any listening that I have to stand here and defend their integrity, but I do. Because if you believe that Special Agent Brandon and Lieutenant Willis and the other law enforcement that took the stand here, including
I'm objecting because I'm allowed to argue based on what's in evidence, and Miss McDonald is trying to make me sound like I've done something wrong, and I didn't. My argument was proper.
argument. It's my rebuttal.
Yeah, and overruled. You commented on the statements of the police officers. You argued about these statements of the police officers. She gets to argue about the statements.
The exact quote was, they probably did that to all the witnesses in the case. If you believe that, then you believe that the sheriff's office, Lieutenant Willis, Special Agent Brandon, the ATF, the federal marshals, the Detroit Police Department, anyone who the evidence tech, they were all in some sort of conspiracy. That's what you have to believe, and I know that that's not what you're going to find. Look at the evidence, apply the law, and decide what the truth is. That's all I've ever asked you to do. That's all the judge is going to ask you to do. Nothing here was designed. Nothing here was made up. And I don't have to convince you of that because I know that you're going to use your hearts and your minds and your sense of reason, and you're going to look at the evidence. The first statement Jennifer Crumbley makes about this gun, her son's gun, was at the substation after the shooting, and this is what she said. It was hidden. It was hidden. That's what she said. It was hidden, ammunition separately. It was hidden in a dresser. It was hidden. That's all she said about it. The school's actions or inactions do not excuse the culpable behavior by defendant. Ladies and gentlemen, he literally drew a picture of what he was going to do. He drew a picture. It says, "Help me." It has the drawing of the gun that she bought him, posted, and bragged about. Blood everywhere. The thoughts won't stop. The world is dead. He drew her a picture. Pretty egregious and unique circumstances. And in fact, it is absolutely not true that we have to worry that we'll all be sitting here. We agree on one thing. Her testimony is evidence. Jennifer Crumbley's testimony is evidence, and you should consider it. And when you consider it, I'm confident that you will agree it is not consistent at all. It wasn't even consistent from her direct examination to her cross-examination. She acknowledged sitting here when Mr. Keys asked her about, "Where's his phone? You said you took the phone." You heard what she said. "We took his gun away. We took his gun away." I don't have to prove flight beyond a reasonable doubt. I already told you that. You can infer consciousness of mind. And what does that mean? You run, you delete text messages, and you lie because you know she knew she did something wrong. The question about why Jennifer Crumbley didn't take one of these small actions, secure the gun, find out where the gun is, it looms large.
Those are small actions, very small actions.
There is no one it looms larger for than the victims and the family members of those kids who were killed on that day. We don't have to prove why. But remember what she said. "I wouldn't change a thing." Just hours ago.
That's the most egregious part, you guys. She actually said on that stand earlier, "I wouldn't change anything that I did. I wouldn't change." Yeah, she was this prosecutor is on 1.25 speed. I put the other one on hyperspeed because she went on for so long. And I just couldn't bear it. And she just kind of droned over and over about the same types of arguments. So yeah, when Jennifer Crumbley said on the stand, that's why I wanted to go through her. I'll probably do that tomorrow. I'll go through her testimony tomorrow during verdict watch because I'm pretty sure they said they're definitely not going to come back today with the verdict because I think the jury was sent home. So I'll start going through her testimony tomorrow. At the beginning of today's testimony, okay, the prosecutor started asking Jennifer Crumbley about her affair, and he started asking her about how she started making arrangements with other people to join them at a hotel, and Shannon, the defense counsel, piped up and objected, and then they were kind of going back and forth, and at one point Shannon says, "Oh, this is going to get exciting." I was like, what the hell? She actually, almost like she was watching an episode of Kardashians. Ooh, wow, this is going to get spicy. We're going to talk about threesomes and stuff. And at some point, the prosecutor's like, "I'm sorry, but this is serious. This is a serious thing we're talking about here." It was so disrespectful. It was so inconsiderate of the families that are sitting in that room. So I'll show that tomorrow, but let's let the prosecutor continue.
She said, "I wouldn't change a thing." This prosecution is about nothing else except the facts of this case and what Jennifer Crumbley did and what she didn't do. If only I could look at the faces of these parents who are dealing with unspeakable darkness and grief. If only I could make that better, I could appease them, as defense counsel suggests, by charging Jennifer Crumbley. These are the parents of Hannah St. Juliana. These are the parents of Madison Baldwin. These are the parents of Tate Meir. These are the parents of Justin Schilling. And not just their parents, they are mothers and they are fathers and they are sisters and their brothers. And do not think for 1 second that this prosecution takes any of that pain away, because it doesn't. This isn't an effort to appease anybody. Your verdict means one thing. It means Jennifer Crumbley is guilty. 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter beyond a reasonable doubt. And I am not going to stand here and tell you that that's going to take away this pain that these families feel, because it will not.
Exactly.
I won't stand here and say that the pain will be gone from Molly Darnell or Christy Gibson Marshall or Special Agent Brandon, who ran out of that office so quickly that his chair was spinning, or Ed Robrowski, who viewed the surveillance video to identify the path of the shooter and it was burned in his brain forever, or for Lieutenant Tim Willis, who answered the call to lead and maybe the biggest ask of his entire career, but one he did not back away from. Don't render this verdict for the hundreds of kids in that school. It will not appease them. Nothing will. But you are now called upon. You are called upon. You are called upon to do your part as jurors, to keep the oath that you took, to be fair, to be honest, to be impartial. You are the ultimate fact finder. But what happened that day? You are the ultimate fact finder of the truth. We have met our burden. We have proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Jennifer Crumbley is guilty of 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter for failing to exercise ordinary care when the smallest, tragically simple thing could have prevented it.
Exactly. One Red Rose, yeah, she defended one of our nation's biggest, most long-acting sex offenders, Larry Nassar. Yeah.
It could have saved Hannah. It could have saved Madison. It could have saved Tate. And it could have saved Justin. And she sat here and she said she wouldn't do one thing different. And lastly,
Yep.
I'm gonna address the question I know that's on the minds of a lot of people in this courtroom and a lot of people listening. I'm gonna say what I know they're all asking and they want to say. When she took the stand and she testified about her own loss, and she was asked the question, "You lost everything." She said yes. She hasn't lost everything, ladies and gentlemen.
Nope.
Her son is still alive.
Yep.
Find her guilty of 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty powerful. You know, I just want to, I said this at the beginning of this stream. I'm going to end this in a minute, but to me, this case is not about gun ownership and gun rights. It's about understanding when your kid is in mental distress, understanding the signs, not ignoring it, and taking absolutely simple, dead simple measures to prevent them from being able to get into a deadly weapon when they are suffering from mental distress, so they can't hurt themselves or others. That's what this is about. And your kid is not going to come up to you and say, "Mom, I think I have bipolar. Mom, I hear voices in my head." They're going to express those issues in different ways. They're going to say, "Things are flying around the room." And are you going to look at them and go, "Ah, ha, 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 that's so funny. You're just being goofy"? No. Not if it happens over and over and over again. Not if he's acting more and more depressed. Not if he's more and more isolated. Not if you're getting more and more fights. This is not about your feelings, about how you're being burdened with, with their bad behavior. Sometimes their bad behavior is because they're having mental distress, and it's the only way they can express it. Okay? So I'm not trying to lecture. I don't think I have no idea about any of your lives. So this does not apply to any specific human being that this is reaching out to. I'm angry at Jennifer Crumbley for not taking those simple steps, whether she's found guilty or not guilty. At least, hopefully by now, even if she's found not guilty, hopefully by now she realizes that she made massive mistakes. I'm sure she definitely, but she says she wouldn't change anything. So hopefully other people have learned from her mistakes. Hopefully. Don't be so rigid in your thinking. It's not worth it to be so rigid in your thinking that you're like, oh, this is about gun ownership. Guns all the way. She shouldn't have done anything different. Sorry. If you agree that the gun issue we have in this country is about mental illness and mental distress, then learn what that looks like and how to address it. And start soon. Because if you don't, start early. Because if you don't, it'll progress and it'll get worse and worse and worse. It's like cancer. Stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. The earlier you get it, the better the chance you have to address it. All right. So I'm sorry. Okay, I'm done. I could go on and on and on and on and on about this. The last thing I'll say is that the internet is not helping. Okay. The internet is not helping. That's a lecture for another day. I give that lecture all the time. All right. So I plan to do a verdict watch tomorrow with Jennifer Crumbley's testimony, because that was just as infuriating in many ways, but there are some things to learn from it, and we can watch for the verdict together. And we'll see what happens. I hope that you all have a great rest of your day or evening or whatever. Thank you, Evil Queen. Thank you, Dynamite. Thank you, everybody. Please remember to hit the thumbs up or down, even if, just to engage. Hit the membership link if you want to join. Thank you very, very much. Don't worry about it, sweetheart, for the gifted memberships. Welcome to the new members who got new memberships in that way. And I will see you on the other side. Bye-bye.